Have you ever walked past a name carved in stone, and wondered what it cost to put it there? Not just the battles or the wounds, but the silence that followed. Sometimes, the greatest acts go unnoticed. And sometimes, the world forgets who they were done for. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I found myself back at the memorial wall in our little town. The kind of place most people pass by without really stopping. The bricks were cold, still slick from the early rain. Some names had fresh flowers or little flags tucked beside them. Others, just dust. Forgotten, maybe. Or maybe, remembered in ways the world can't see. I stood there longer than I meant to. My eyes landed on a name near the bottom corner. Faded, the letters softened by time. Charles E. Myers. It didn't ring any bells for me at first. Just another name among many. But something about it felt different. No flowers. No flag. Just the name. Like he was still waiting for someone to remember. A maintenance worker passed by, nodding politely. I asked if many people came to visit that name. He paused, looked at the stone, then shrugged. Haven't seen anyone in years. And that was it. A name carved in granite. A man who once lived, once mattered, maybe even saved someone's life, and now, nothing. No one. But what I didn't know that morning, standing in the drizzle, was this: that name wasn't just a soldier's. It was a promise. And someone had been carrying the weight of that promise for over 50 years. This is the story of what happened when silence was finally broken. Charlie Myers and David Rusk grew up 3 blocks apart in a town where everyone knew your father's job and your mother's casserole. They weren't best friends, not in the way boys always are in stories like this. They were something quieter, dependable. If Charlie forgot his lunch, David shared. If David got caught skipping church, Charlie never said a word. It was that kind of bond. They enlisted together in the fall of '67. It wasn't a grand gesture. No flag waving, no big speeches. Just 2 18-year-olds, too proud to stay behind, and too unsure of who they were becoming to say no. Charlie's mom cried. David's dad said, "Maybe this'll make men out of you." That was the last time they saw Missouri for a long while. Basic training was a blur of sweat and shouted orders. Charlie kept his head down, did what he was told. David cracked jokes even when he was bone-tired. The drill sergeants liked Charlie. They respected David. Together, they made it through. But it was that first night in the barracks that stuck with David. The lights had gone out. Everyone else was asleep. Charlie whispered across the dark, "If we get sent, don't try to be a hero. Just watch my back." David had laughed. "You don't have to tell me twice." That was their promise. Not a dramatic oath, not some cinematic handshake. Just 2 kids, too young to understand what war would ask of them, swearing they'd look out for each other. And from that moment on, they did. When orders came down for Korea, the room went quiet. Charlie didn't flinch. David, for once, didn't joke. They packed their gear, wrote short letters home, and boarded the transport like they were just doing another chore. But under it all, beneath the layers of uniform and discipline, something heavier was already beginning to settle. The kind of weight only silence knows how to carry. The fog rolled in thick that morning, low and slow, like it didn't want the day to begin. Everything felt quieter than usual, even for Korea. No gunfire in the distance. No shouting officers. Just the cold and the waiting. Charlie stood by the edge of their makeshift camp, his rifle slung across his back, watching the mist swallow the trees. David was behind him, fiddling with a torn strap on his pack. "You ever think," he asked, not really looking up, "that maybe we're not supposed to come back from this?" Charlie didn't turn around. "I don't think about that." David chuckled, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Yeah, well, I do." They'd been told the night before they'd be moving out at dawn. Something about a supply route under threat, a village caught in the crossfire. The kind of mission that didn't make the newspapers back home. Just another patrol. Another risk. Another place where the wrong step could be the last. David walked over, pulled something from inside his shirt, a small silver locket, tarnished but sturdy. Inside was a photo of his dad in uniform, taken during the Second World War. He gave me this before I shipped out. Said he didn't need it anymore. He placed it in Charlie's hand. You carry it today. Might give you better luck than it gave him. Charlie looked down at the locket, then at David. You sure? David nodded. You're the one who doesn't think about not coming back. Might as well stack the odds. Charlie didn't say thank you. He just tucked it into the inner pocket of his jacket and gave a small nod. The call to move came shortly after. Boots crunching on wet dirt. Radio static. Orders barked low and quick. The kind of organized chaos soldiers come to recognize as routine. As they hiked through the valley, the air felt wrong. Too quiet. The birds weren't singing. The breeze carried no scent of smoke or gunpowder, but it carried something else. Tension. The kind that sticks to your skin. Charlie stayed close to David, eyes sweeping the tree line. Every now and then, their shoulders brushed. Not by accident. They never said it, but they both felt it, that edge. That sense that today wasn't like the others. About a mile in, they came to a clearing. Open ground. Too open. A sergeant raised his hand to halt the line. Men crouched. Hearts pounded. David turned, whispering, I don't like this, Charlie. Charlie's hand tightened around the rifle grip. Neither do I. And then, the wind shifted. It was the smallest thing. A branch twitching. A glint of light. A sound, maybe. Charlie's breath caught in his throat. He glanced at David. And in that split second, a decision was made. He didn't know yet what was coming. But something inside him did. Something quiet. Something heavy. And from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The crack of a rifle split the air. Not the kind of sound that echoes. The kind that pierces. Sharp. Final. Charlie didn't think. He moved. David had just shifted his stance, lifting his head for a better view across the field, when Charlie saw it, a flicker of movement in the tree line, the unmistakable shimmer of glass reflecting light. A scope. A sniper. There wasn't time to shout. No time for orders or warnings. Just a breath. A choice. Charlie lunged. The force knocked David sideways. The two of them hit the ground hard, a blur of dust and limbs. A heartbeat later, a single shot rang out. Not a barrage. Just one. Precise. Cold. Charlie didn't cry out. He didn't even flinch. David rolled over, confused, adrenaline pounding. What the hell was? Then he saw Charlie. Lying still. Face turned to the side. Eyes open, but fading. Blood pooled beneath him. Slow at first. Then steady. David crawled closer, hands shaking. Charlie. Charlie, come on. Charlie blinked, barely. His lips moved. David leaned in. You okay? Charlie whispered, voice thin. David nodded too fast. I'm fine, you idiot. I'm fine. What did you do? Charlie tried to smile, but it barely registered. His hand trembled as he reached toward David's chest, like he was checking something. But his fingers came up short and landed on David's arm instead. He gripped it, weak but steady. Stay low, Charlie murmured. Don't get up. And that was it. No grand farewell. No music. Just a silence that swallowed the clearing. The rest of the unit surged forward then, fanning out, returning fire. The sniper was gone. Maybe already dead. Maybe watching from somewhere else. It didn't matter. David didn't move. He stayed there, crouched beside Charlie's body, one hand pressed to his friend's chest like he could will the blood to stop. The other curled into a fist, white-knuckled and useless. A medic tried to pull him away. He shook them off. "I need a second," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. Nobody argued. The locket, David's locket, had slipped from Charlie's pocket during the fall. It was lying just a few inches from his hand. David picked it up, fingers numb. He looked at it for a long time. Then, quietly, he placed it back in Charlie's jacket. He zipped it shut. Later, when they zipped the body bag, nobody asked questions. Nobody said anything. But they all knew. Charlie had seen the shot coming. And he'd made a choice. A choice that didn't make headlines. A choice that didn't get a parade or a plaque. A choice that saved a life. David would carry that moment, not just the guilt or the grief, but the stillness of it. The way Charlie moved without hesitation. The weight of what it meant. Because in that single instant, Charlie had done something no metal could ever capture. He had taken a bullet meant for his friend. And with it, he had taken a part of David that would never quite come back. They sent Charlie's body home with the others 2 weeks later. There was no ceremony. No folded flag handed off to anyone. Just a wooden crate marked with his name, and a typed letter tucked into an envelope. Standard protocol. David watched the crate get loaded. He didn't speak. He hadn't said much since the clearing. The unit moved on. Missions continued. But something had shifted inside him. It wasn't grief in the way people usually talk about it. It was quieter. Heaviness in the bones. Words caught behind the teeth. One evening, back at base, he sat at the edge of his cot with a pen in his hand. A single piece of stationery in front of him. The kind they gave you to write home. He stared at the top line for nearly an hour. Dear Mrs. Myers. That was all he had. He tried again. Charlie saved my life. Charlie saw the sniper. Charlie made a choice. He couldn't finish it. The words felt wrong. Too small. Or maybe too heavy. What do you tell a mother whose son died instead of you? What do you say when you were the one meant to die? The paper stayed blank. He folded it, tucked it into his pack, and never took it out again. When he finally got stateside, everything felt foreign. The streets were the same. The stores. The smell of fried food. But he wasn't. His parents greeted him with hugs and a homemade sign. His sister cried. But David didn't feel anything. At his welcome home gathering, a neighbor asked him if he knew a kid named Charlie Myers, went off to Korea around the same time as you, didn't he? David just nodded. Said, yeah. I knew him. That was all. He didn't say that Charlie had died in his place. He didn't say that every step he took back home felt borrowed. He didn't say that he still heard the gunshot at night. Instead, he smiled politely, took another bite of casserole, and disappeared into the crowd. The weeks passed. Then months. Then years. He kept the locket. Kept the uniform. Kept the memory sealed tight like a jar you're afraid to open because you know the moment you do, it'll all come spilling out. And the letter? Still unwritten. Every so often, he'd pull out that old piece of stationery. Read the first line. Think about finishing it. But he never did. Because some things are too hard to explain. And some debts. They're too big for words. David never talked about Korea. Not at the VFW. Not at family dinners. Not even when someone else brought it up. He'd nod, maybe offer a tight smile, then change the subject. Over time, people stopped asking. He found a job fixing HVAC systems, work that didn't require much conversation. He was good with his hands. Reliable. The kind of guy who showed up early, did the work, and never complained. Customers liked him. But no one really knew him. He never married. Said he was too busy, though that wasn't true. He just never felt like he had the right to build a life when Charlie hadn't been given the chance to finish his. Every date, every possibility of something more, he'd find a reason to step away. Quietly. Without explanation. He kept to a routine. Early mornings. Strong coffee. A walk before work. Then long hours under boilers and in crawlspaces where no one expected him to talk about the past. He liked it that way. But at night, the silence grew heavy. He'd sit in the small living room of his modest house, a folded American flag on the mantel, and a photograph of his old unit tucked into the corner of the mirror. He never framed Charlie's picture. That felt too final. Like he was admitting he was gone. Sometimes, after a long day, he'd take out the old locket. The one Charlie had carried that morning. He'd run his thumb across the dent in the silver, right where the bullet's impact must have pressed through the jacket. He never wore it. Just held it, like something sacred. There were moments, quiet, in-between moments, when he thought about writing the letter again. About telling someone the truth. But who? Charlie's mother had passed away years ago. No siblings. No wife. No one left to hear it. So he lived with it. Not in shame. But in shadow. At work, he became the guy who showed up early and stayed late. At the diner, he always sat in the corner booth. At church, he came in just after the first hymn and left before the final prayer. People called him reserved. Polite. A little distant. No one ever guessed what he carried. And David never corrected them. Because there are some burdens that don't show. Some promises that don't fade, even after 50 years. He didn't seek recognition. Didn't think he deserved it. Charlie had saved his life. And David had spent every day since trying to live it, quietly, deliberately, in a way he hoped might have honored the man who gave it to him. But even in his silence, the memory stayed sharp. Charlie's voice. His eyes. That final moment in the clearing. David lived, yes. But never quite in the light. David was in his 70s when the letter finally took shape. It was a Sunday morning. He was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, pen resting on a yellowed notepad. The words came slower than he expected, but steadier than before. No crossed-out lines. No pauses. Just a steady hand and a quiet resolve. He wrote about Charlie. About the clearing. About the locket. He wrote what no one else had ever known. That Charlie Myers had made a choice that day. A deliberate, silent choice. One that had allowed David to come home, and cost Charlie everything. The letter wasn't addressed to a family member. There were none left. It was sent to a local veteran's office, tucked inside a plain envelope with a simple request: please see that this story is not lost. He didn't expect anything from it. No reply. No fanfare. Just a way to finally say what had been left unsaid. A few weeks later, he got a call. A soft-spoken woman on the other end of the line said she'd read his letter. Said her team had verified the records. Said they'd found mention of Charlie's name on a forgotten casualty list, with no commendation, no acknowledgement. Just a date. A location. And the word, deceased. We'd like to honor him, she said. If that's all right with you. David didn't say yes right away. He just held the phone for a long moment. Then he whispered, it's long overdue. They organized a small ceremony. Not a parade. Not a big production. Just a gathering in a quiet hall at the edge of town. A few chairs. A flag. And one name, Charlie Ethan Myers, spoken out loud for the first time in decades. David brought the locket. He held it in his palm during the entire ceremony, thumb pressed against the worn silver. When the medal was presented, it wasn't handed to David. It was placed on a stand next to a framed photo of Charlie in uniform. Young. Steady. Eyes full of the kind of resolve that never needed words. The room was silent as the citation was read. Not dramatic. Just honest. He placed the life of his fellow soldier above his own. Without hesitation. Without recognition. His actions saved a life and demonstrated the quiet courage that defines true service. David stood, hands at his sides, face calm but tight. He didn't cry. But when the room emptied out, and only the staff remained, he walked over to the display, placed his hand gently on the glass frame, and said softly, "They finally see you now, Charlie." Then he placed the locket beside the medal. And for the first time in 50 years, he exhaled. Not out of relief, but reverence. The new plaque at the Veterans Memorial was small. Modest, like the man it honored. It sat beneath the larger panels, tucked just to the side, as if waiting patiently all these years for its place. Charlie E. Myers. Private First Class, U.S. Army. Korea, 1951. Sacrificed his life to save another. David came alone. He stood beneath a pale sky, the kind that always threatened rain but never followed through. A handful of fallen leaves skittered across the path as he walked toward the wall, hands tucked in his coat pockets. He didn't bring flowers. Just the same worn steps and a quiet heart. For a while, he didn't move. Just stood there, eyes on the plaque. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small slip of folded paper. The final copy of the letter he had written. He hadn't read it since he mailed the first one. But now, here, he unfolded it slowly and whispered the words to the empty air. It wasn't for anyone else to hear. Just Charlie. A few passers-by wandered through the memorial garden, a young couple, an older man walking his dog, but no one stopped. No one interrupted. David liked it that way. It had never been about an audience. He knelt down once the words were finished. Pressed the letter flat against the stone. Then rested his hand on the plaque like one would on a shoulder. "You stayed with me," he said softly. "Even when I didn't say your name. Even when I didn't think I deserved to." His voice caught, just for a second. "I hope this is enough. I hope, you know now." He stayed a few minutes longer. Then stood, brushed off his coat and took one last look. As he turned to leave, he heard a voice behind him, older, gentle. "Did you know him?" David paused. Turned. It was a gray-haired man with a soft face and kind eyes. Maybe late 70s, maybe older. "Yes," David said. "I did." The man nodded slowly. He must have been something. David looked back at the plaque. Then back at the man. He was everything. The man didn't ask anything more. Just gave a respectful nod and continued walking. David watched him go, then stepped away from the wall. He didn't feel lighter. Not exactly. But something in him had shifted. A burden carried long enough starts to become part of you. You forget what it was like before the weight. But sometimes, just saying a name, out loud, without shame or fear, can remind you of the space it once filled. As he walked toward the exit, the wind picked up slightly. The leaves lifted from the path and danced ahead of him. And in that quiet motion, something gentle settled in. Charlie Myers had a name again. Not just in stone. Not just in memory. But in the world. Spoken. Seen. Honored. And for the first time in over 50 years. David Rusk let the silence go. Some stories don't end with applause, they end with a whisper, and a name finally spoken after 50 years of silence. The story of Charlie Myers reminds us that heroism isn't always loud. It doesn't always wear medals or stand in front of cameras. Sometimes, it lies in the quiet choice to protect a friend, to carry the weight of sacrifice, and to live with dignity even in grief. David Rusk carried that weight for decades, not out of guilt, but out of love. He lived a life shaped by one moment of bravery that the world never saw, until he chose to tell it. And in doing so, he didn't just honor Charlie, he reminded all of us that every name has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. So ask yourself, is there someone in your life whose name carries more than memory, someone whose quiet courage deserves to be remembered out loud? If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in quiet heroes, and subscribe to Legacy of Courage Stories. Together, we can make sure that no sacrifice stays forgotten, and no name remains unspoken.